No, what I was gonna say is I think the catastrophe that was his cabinet was
Oh yeah, yeah.
like that was the bigger issue. It was like he was a bad manager. That's my
He was a bad
take.
manager in government. He thought that his skill set was going to transfer, and it didn't transfer, which is one of the
Well,
reasons why so many people.
I don't have any meaningful evidence to show that he was a good manager in business either.
Well,
Like
the fact that he brought so many people from his successful businesses into his cabinet is evidence to me. Like that's how I explain that.
what successful businesses? All of his businesses have been maybe not abject failures, but have not really gone anywhere.
I've heard this
Like
repeatedly, but it seems to me that the majority of his businesses are what made him billions of dollars. Otherwise, he wouldn't have billions of dollars.
but he didn't have billions of dollars. That's the thing. Is like he seemed to have billions of dollars, but in reality he was like he had losses through the ass, right? Such that he like didn't have to pay taxes. Really
But
weird.
everybody
I
has
don't
losses
tax,
through the ass. That's how billionaires stay
the
billionaires.
tax code the tax code is weird. Tax code needs to fucking um
Well, I'm going to probably
um
claim capital gains losses next year. But yes, I
that's
understand.
perfect. Yeah, but like he puts on a good show. I think that's what people. That's
That's a
where
big part of
he
it, yeah.
capitalized, and that's even that wasn't what troubled me. It's what troubles me about Trump is he seems to use a lot of authoritarian rhetoric. That's what bothers me about Trump. Or not even rhetoric per se, because I don't think it qualifies as rhetoric. Like it's so like low grade. Like I don't know if it even counts as like true rhetorical statements. But like as far as his
Well, it's low grade compared to what we're used to, which is the problem. So, like,
sure,
if you
sure,
listen to people
it's
who
it
are just I want to say enthusiastic, let's say charismatic. If you listen to people who are charismatic speakers, and this is ironic actually, because one of the things that the left has repeatedly attempted to do is deconstruct the concept of successful rhetoric. Because successful rhetoric, and there's a whole thing about this, I could go on for fucking hours about Ryan
right.
Wash and debate and how he just filibustered debates and just he screamed about how bad white people are, and that was hailed as a fucking amazing achievement, and he literally won national titles in debate doing this. So I find it extremely humorous and ironic that someone looks at Trump and they're like, oh, we can't exactly translate the words that he says, put it down on paper, and have it make sense. But you know what it does look like when we put it down on paper? Fucking gibberish. Now, if you listen
Yeah,
to it, and I don't,
it
granted,
doesn't sound like gibberish. Right, right. He's very much a stream of consciousness individual.
that's
Right.
performance.
Yeah, right. It is, but like you're right. We're not used to that for a president. We're not, or at least
Oh, we're
we
used to
view
performance. We're used to
stream of
performance.
right, right. We're not used to like the just spouting whatever's on the top of your head from a president.
I
You're
still don't. I
right.
mean, I don't think it's necessarily just there were times when it was that, but I don't think
Right,
it's just
and then
whatever's
what's
on the
funny
top of his
is
head.
his speeches that no one ever talked about were the ones where he just read from a prompt.
Right.
Well, as
Because
soon
it's
as he read from
fucking
a prompt,
boring.
no one gave a shit. But as soon as he was like these Mexicans, everyone's like, oh shit.
Now, but why? But why didn't they talk about the speeches where he read from a prompt?
Because they generally didn't have any content to them that was anything particularly noteworthy as far as from the
Clickable.
president,
Anything
right?
clickable. It was
Right.
exactly the
No.
same as Obama, which was very clickable, but every single speech he read from a prompt was Obama.
Yeah,
And they didn't have any problem writing articles about that shit.
that's true. So it was very selective hearing type of.
I wouldn't say it's
I don't
that.
doubt that.
I wouldn't say it's that. I think it's that Trump raised the bar to the point where the next person, or if I should say the next person, Joe Biden currently, does not get media coverage with respect to his speeches.
Nope. It's because they're not interesting.
And that's because Trump raised the bar. And he raised the
Yeah.
bar by doing his version of rhetoric. And his version of rhetoric
Which is
was entertaining. It
and
wasn't.
very inflammatory, extraordinarily
It,
inflammatory.
I wouldn't say extraordinarily. It was in many cases inflammatory, but in some cases it was also just using He was using rhetoric and terminology that the people he was trying to get, it's difficult to explain. Because what will happen is there's going to be a group of people who characterize the individuals who liked what he said as just fucking idiotic, low IQ, racist, just mongrels who want nothing more than to just liquidate everybody who's slightly, more brown than them. That's not the case, though. He was using Trump, and this has a lot to do with I haven't read any fucking books about his origins, but I've heard a lot about his origins. He's some people have characterized Trump as being upset about the fact that he never fit into the class of people that currently run Washington. He's always been rich enough, but he has not fit in the sense that he doesn't operate the same way they do. Now, I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but what I know is it gives someone like Trump with Trump's pathology, it gives someone like him a reason to say, fuck you. By the way, there's a whole bunch of people out here, roughly, if you want to use votes, 75 million people who also say fuck you. So, have fun. We're going to keep saying fuck you, and I'm going to keep pandering to these people because it works.
Yeah.
I'm not saying he's like a good guy. I'm saying he's a different type of politician. I think we're going to see a lot 100%. More politicians like him.
Yeah. That just lean into the... Yeah. It's fascinating. It's funny to me. When when like we were like people were shocked that like why did so many like Cuban Americans in Florida vote for Trump? Like, they don't understand.
Yeah.
Like, and it's like, oh, and then I remember seeing a tweet about like, I think it was a tweet. It was something about like, oh, it's because they have like a white supremacist complex too. And I'm like sitting here like going like, what the fuck?
Dude, that was that was literally 2016. That was 2016. They called it internalized misogyny.
It's like, who the fuck? Like, okay, I have never met. So maybe Cubans are different. I don't know many Cubans, but I know quite a number of Hispanics. Like, I grew up in LA, obviously, right? I never once got any vibe of any kind of, like, anything. Like, they were definitely proud of being Mexican, but there was no, like, I never felt a vibe of, like, we're superior. Do you know what I mean? Like,
what do you mean?
That almost seems like contrary. Like somehow, like, oh, like, I never got like white supremacy from Hispanics. Like it.
Oh no. What they're describing is internalized white supremacy. So the idea is, if there's a group of people that come here and succeed, and they succeed as a direct result of the system, that means they have internalized white supremacy.
Oh, I see what you're saying. So that internalized white supremacy is like subconscious. It's not even like
100%, and that's the only way they can attack it. Because they can't attack it by saying, look, these KKK guys just lynched a black man. Doesn't happen anymore. Nothing even close to it happens anymore. The closest thing that happens to that is a black kid literally killing himself, and then a bunch of outlets trying to say, oh man, someone must have fucking literally hung this black kid. Like, that's the closest they get. That was a real story that happened.
The one that was in LA, right? Like, there was supposedly a bunch of like black kids that died
of suicide.
They were, like, thinking it was, and they were saying they think it was actually like lynchings by white supremacists in Southern California.
So there was, and it was I don't even think it was LA.
To be fair, there are defo white supremacists. I have seen that.
I would hope that in one of literally the largest metropolitan area in the world, I would hope that if there are white supremacists, there's at least one there.
Yeah. There's. That's a weird way to put it, but I guess you're right.
Statistically speaking, it's a bad thing if you can't find any there. Like, statistically speaking, it means the divide is way worse than anybody ever thought. Because we roughly know how many actual, and to say white supremacy, they've literally diluted the term to the point that it makes no sense to say anymore. Like,
right. No, when I say white supremacist, I mean someone who genuinely spouts like Nazi, genuine white nationalist rhetoric.
I
Not
wouldn't
someone
even
who's
say
just
that. I
like,
wouldn't. I wouldn't even say that because I have to delineate. Now they've gotten to the point where they've diluted terms to such a degree that I have
sure,
to actually delineate between these things. So
right,
people who are white supremacists are people who think that white people are, whether it's genetic or
superior,
whatever, better than
superior, right?
another race.
Versus other people who are ethno-nationalists who don't necessarily think white people are superior, but generally think that like it is the better for individuals to commingle with those whom they have common genetic ancestry.
Right.
Right.
And there's
Or
a correlation
common
between white
regional ancestry.
supremacists and ethno-nationalists of 100%,
Right,
obviously.
right. There is. Right, right. No, and I mean, it's funny to think of like ethno-nationalism, as far as it's not white, is okay, but ethno-nationalism, as soon as it's white, is problematic. I'm not
Oh,
saying that
absolutely.
ethno-nationalism is good in any regard. I think ethno-national,
Uh,
like if you're going to say, you have to say either ethno-nationalism is bad or ethno-nationalism is good. And I would rather
So
fall on the side of ethno-nationalism
I've
is
I've
bad.
I've thought
I
about this
don't.
a lot.
Okay, and I will state, and I hate saying this because it's probably, if like the FBI is listening, they're always whitey supremo. Um, but the ethno nationalists have had good arguments, and it's hard to, right. I mean, as far as like raw evidence, like when you look at some of these countries that are by and large, of a
Yeah.
singular people,
This is
tend to be
exactly
very
what I was. This
successful.
is 100% what I was. I think I can soften that a little bit if I say the ethno-nationalist argument is almost purely predicated, and this is how I delineate between these two things.
Hmm. Hmm.
I delineate between these two things by saying one is organic and one is inorganic. Organic
Hmm.
ethno-nationalism is something that occurs naturally, like in Norway, Sweden, and Finland. Inorganic
Right.
ethno-nationalism is like what Malcolm X wanted to do, which was literally co-opt an entire, just a huge swath of space and say only black people, or only black people are, or black people are welcome here the most, and you can still come in if you want, but just recognize that this is a place where black people are here welcome the most. That's inorganic. So organic ethno-nationalism is something that is emergent, and inorganic ethno-nationalism is not. So
Yeah.
the
Sure.
fact that
Yeah.
ethno-nationalists have a good argument is incidental. It's not
Yeah.
ethno-nationalism that was manufactured, because
Right.
manufactured ethno-nationalism is a bad thing. Ethno-nationalism that is organic and emergent is obviously a good thing.
Right. Well, and it's funny because we actually engage in a form of ethno-nationalism on a micro scale in the United States,
Absolutely.
right? Like as far as like why is there a Chinatown? Why is there a Koreatown? Why is there like a part of the city that's like the Mexican part of the city? Why is it, you know what I mean? Like
Well,
people
depending on
naturally
which one of those things you're
gravitate.
talking about, there's arguments against them, right? So, like a Tokyo
Yeah.
town or Little Tokyo or a Chinatown, blah 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 blah. These are all byproducts of an overtly white society, whereas the boroughs and the sort of slums or the ghettos, those are the direct result of the oppression of an
Right.
overtly,
Right.
not white
Right.
supremacist,
Whereas
but they would call it white supremacist though.
right, right. But I mean, like you go to anywhere in the world, right, where there is a sizable population of a given immigrant people, they're going to naturally congregate around each other for a variety of reasons.
100%.
Some of them
And
are
yeah,
just
absolutely.
most of them are actually like filial based. Like I don't even think it's like I would say like I mean because I mean admittedly if you go back into the 19th century there was definitely like I don't know if there was like overt oppression but there was definitely like a form of racism against uh like Asian people when they immigrated to America, right? But I don't think
Yeah,
it was more of like an othering, like a normal form of othering.
it was the
Still
exact same thing
bad,
with Irish.
but it wasn't like an overt like oh like you
No, it's not
fuck
because you're
you
yellow.
like right. It was just like oh you're different. You don't.
You're
It
not
was
me.
actually probably more. It had more to do with probably like you don't speak English.
No,
Like I don't think anyone gave two shits about them being like Asian. It was just like you don't speak English.
nobody
I
mentions
can't
this,
talk
but
to
it's
you.
literally the through line from everything from like fucking 1840 through 2021. Like, if you don't speak English, then I can't get around it. I've got a problem with you. And the reason why is because I can't understand. So anybody who speaks even partial English who can express to me a concept that I can figure out what it is so even if it's just a minor phrase, if it's just the tiniest little thing, like I'm sorry, like I fucking hate even trying to formulate this because it makes it seem like I want apologetics or something. But if it's like I want to know something better, or I'm trying to do language better, or I'm trying to learn, I can't even. There are people who couldn't speak English, and I Xeroxed the fucking papers that they needed to get their family members into this country at my work that just laid me off. Like, and this happened 2 or 3 times at least. Like, I helped the custodial staff where I worked get their families into this country. And there are people who would call me racist because I think it's ridiculous that anybody who comes into contact with someone that can't speak English has a legitimate grievance. I would never go to another country and expect them to speak English. If they did, fantastic. But if they don't, that's fucking my problem. Like, if I try to speak their language and they're like, nah, I know English, we'll do that. Okay, great, fantastic. But there's just no fucking way.
It's funny. It's funny how, like, France could get away with it. France can be dickish about their home language as they want.
I've heard that, like even in high school, back in like 2002, 2003, they used to have an annual thing where they would take the senior class to France, and all of the kids would try to practice their French in Paris, and they would just be shut down immediately. No. I know your English. We will speak in my English with the baguette. No, it's like they couldn't fucking practice. They couldn't. Like, it was the number one complaint was Paris is so Anglican in terms of its at least the tourist situation that they just couldn't practice their fucking all they wanted to do was speak French.
You're better off going to like one of the like small towns or something where like.
But no one wants those people in their small towns. That's why they're small towns. These people are insular communities. They feel exactly the same way as Americans feel in America. They don't fucking want you there.
Right. No one does. Right. That's not a unique anything feeling. That's just human.
Absolutely not. Like, but guess what? The French people are white.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like, well, fuck you. But yeah, it's it's. You're right though. Like America, I think gets railed against it the most. Admittedly, it's also the most. See, and this is the bizarro world, right? Like America is if I want to say it's the most, but I can't. I don't have any solid numbers to back it up. Other than my understanding is America is the most multicultural nation in the world.
Yeah, there isn't one. There's no one else, except for possibly really, really small. And this is only per capita. Really, really small countries like Luxembourg, or places that basically attract large numbers of extremely high wealth individuals.
Sure,
like right now,
like Morocco or something.
Exactly. But not even Morocco, because Morocco is still, I think, like I think it's
not Morocco. I'm thinking of Monaco. Sorry.
Where's Monaco?
I thought Monaco was the little tiny country that's just like all wealthy people.
Morocco isn't entirely off base because it's North Africa. So Morocco is the gateway in between.
Monaco's the one that like has the Formula One racing, and I'm pretty sure it's only wealth.
Well, it's the exact same thing in the UAE, but the difference between in the UAE is, I think, even in the UAE, like fucking 5% of the people that come in are just like slaves.
Yeah. God. Anyways, but yeah, no, what I was saying is, like, America, as far as size to, because, I mean, yes, you could say, like, oh, yeah, America has, what is it, 63%? Is it that low now? 72%?
Well, it depends on how you describe it, right? So, because the U.S. Census Bureau...
I know. It's different, like, because they consider Caucasian to include Middle Easterners.
No, not even that, but also Hispanic. So, you've got Hispanic who identifies as Caucasian.
Everyone of European and Middle Eastern descent is considered which is holy fucking shit, so many people. Like, that is a
Yeah, if you
huge
include it all, I
swath.
think it's like 70. It's a little over 70% white.
Yeah. So, but even within that white category, it is surprisingly, it is vastly like. Now, admittedly, there is like like probably you and I both. Like that's why it's interesting for us. I think this is what's funny with apps like 23andMe and these other genetic things. I think they're only interesting to Americans because they actually have like, oh, I don't know what my genetic, right? Oh, it's quite diverse. I've got like, for me at least, well, white diverse, but you know what I mean. Like
Now,
I've
when you
got
say that though,
I've
you're talking about diversity, or you're talking about like the white diversity, or whatever it is. The
I'm just
23 and why it's
I
interesting.
just mean because it's like, oh, I have DNA that has roots in Germany and France versus DNA that has Britain,
But
right?
why is that interesting? That's the thing I'm driving at. So the reason why I think it's interesting is because Americans, and we're one
Mm-hmm.
of the only places on Earth that is like this, Americans do not tie and have never tied their identity to their actual ethnicity. Now, there have
Right,
been
exactly. Whereas,
groups that have done that, but they are not very popular and no one
right,
fucking
right.
cares about them.
Well, and that's what I'm saying. That's the point I'm getting at. Is I think for Americans, it's interesting to do because there's actually like genetic diversity. Whereas I thought it was really humorous when PewDiePie did his genetic test. He came back like what 99.9 Swedish. And I
Yeah,
imagine most people in these other countries are probably the same way, right? Like most people in like these, like if you were to do a genetic test of someone in China, right? Any random Chinese citizen, it's like, all right, let's do your DNA, and oh look, you came back 100% Chinese. Shocker,
but what
right?
type?
Like,
Han Chinese? So that's the thing. Like
right.
that, the other
That's
interesting
right.
thing.
Then
Yeah.
they don't go into that level of detail, right? Because I mean, even with the European ones, like it's as broad as France versus Germany, or France and Germany are lumped together.
Well, you
And
could
to be
say
fair,
all of
historically
Western
speaking,
Europe is just like a fucking.
sure.
It's the same shit.
Well, actually, British Irish is genetically different enough to act distinct from French.
Well, depending on how far back
Um,
you go, I mean, you're gonna find inflection
sure.
points, right? Like,
Well,
okay, well,
you go far enough back, we're all from the same fucking
well,
haploid.
I don't mean that. I
Shit.
mean like
But
within the context. If you scopely focus on just Western Europe, you've got like 90% static, and then you've got these few moments in history where a bunch of
okay.
people move north, a bunch of people blah blah blah. So the Welsh are separate
Well,
from.
and not to mention Britain regularly pillaged and plundered by various factions external to Britain.
But interestingly enough,
The-
based on my understanding, they still managed, despite all of the what is the politically correct way to say this? The possibly uh, what's the how do you say rape? So,
That's
but
why I
that
just
is
said pillaging and plundering.
right. Yeah, that's probably a better way to put it.
It's just because I mean it was basically the pillaging of physical bodies as well.
But that still didn't actually constitute a significant number. But it did constitute a significant enough number that people began to actually acknowledge the fact that, oh, this is so. One of the interesting things I just heard the other day. One of the
I lost you again, son of a bitch. Oh, I lost you.
it was a
I
short
lost you
period
there.
though.
The yeah, it was. I lost you only around. Oh, what was it? Whenever I last spoke. Oh, you were despite all the pillaging and plunder,
Right.
seem to have like retained their Celticness, I guess.
Well,
That is, I
because
assume, what you were
because
getting
it's a
at?
relatively small number. So like despite all of this, we can now, or I guess even probably back then, I'm sure there was some acknowledgement of it. Despite all of it, we could delineate between the people that were and weren't, and this further divided the people who identified with those identities. So there are.
Right.
I mean, one of the weirdest things to me growing up in the Midwest was seeing representations of, like, let's say, American Jewish the I don't want to say the American Jewry because that sounds suspiciously, you know, Spencerish.
Anti-Semitic.
But the American Jewry focusing heavily on, and only with mothers, oddly, for some reason, in media specifically, because I'm in the Midwest. I got nothing but media. So specifically in the media, focusing or putting a lot of emphasis on their progeny only marrying or being with other Jews
Hmm.
in America, which is very odd to an American,
Right.
because an American says, "What the fuck are you talking about, you insane bitch?" And then, "Oh, you must be an anti-Semite." "What the fuck are you talking about? I'm an anti-Semite." Well, turns out that Jewish people don't have kids with other people that aren't Jewish. Why? Because the faith. No, motherfucker, it's the bloodline. You don't want to dilute your bloodline. You're an ethno-fucking nationalist by definition because of your experiences and because of your lineage. Fuck the Holocaust. Thousands of years of ethno-nationalism or ethno-supremacy or whatever you want to call it. The Jews are fundamentally ethno-supremacists. And there's to me, there's no problem with that.
You say it's so funny that you say like people say it's the religion. Well, how do you think where do you think these cultural ideas come from, right? Like it's like you're right to your point. Like they're not necessarily like acidic or anything, but the fact that this has been from, you know what I mean? The fact that has its genesis in ancient texts has likely influenced the people and the culture writ large for literally thousands of years, such that it has gotten to the point where it's just fundamentally ingrained into like their identity, as far as like if they're raised in that mind.
Which is normal. Like if you're gonna be doing that for literally like I don't know, fucking, let's say whatever 1,500 2,000 years, you're not gonna
Catholics. Let's say Catholics. Let's like Italian Catholics. Proper like.
Forget it, Catholics. There was a scene in Wet Hot American. Did you ever see Wet Hot American Summer?
No, I need to see Wet Hot American
Summer.
Oh,
it's so fucking good, dude. And the reason why this movie, I'm not even joking you. This movie was one of the first introductions I ever had to this weirdness that I didn't get the jokes because I was still I had just moved to California, and I had just watched one of my friends in Pasadena. Girl, Sam, showed me Stella, which was this comedy troupe with, you know, Michael Ian Black, Michael Showalter, and this other dude that I feel bad for not being able to remember his name. But the point is, they had this comedy troupe called Stella, and they did all of these shorts. And these shorts were the basis of the show that would eventually come onto Comedy Central, which was watered down and it didn't translate very well. But you'll see these people show up in movies and like Wet Hot American Summer with people like Janine Garofalo and blah, 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 blah. But there are all these weird little jokes that someone who isn't aware of Jewish culture in New York or Jewish culture even in LA, because there is a Jewish culture subculture in LA that I only became aware of after I became aware of the Jewish subculture in media in general.
I was definitely aware of the Jewish subculture in LA because I had friends who were Jewish, so I was like, you know what I mean? Like it's small, but it's very prevalent.
Yeah, and
very strong, well-known community.
And there's a reason for that. Like I went down to Fairfax and I was like, what the fuck is this? But even where I was from, I had people who lived, like I lived with a family friend for a while, and they lived in San Francisco for a long time. And so he would make these jokes because he was a very funny guy and very intelligent. And so he would make these tongue-in-cheek jokes sometimes, and I would be like, what the fuck are you talking about? And then he would try to explain it to me, but it didn't fit. There was no schema that mapped onto my understanding of the world because I'm from Indiana and I'm 17. So when I moved to California and I saw Fairfax Avenue, I was like, oh, I kind of get a little bit of it. And then when I started watching more and more things and I started trying to pay attention to more and more things, I realized, oh, this is a thing. This is a thing. This is an identity that's happening right now. And then I started paying attention to the shit that's happening in New York. Like the shit that's happening in New York right now. Like in Brooklyn. In fucking downtown, whatever the fuck, Williamsburg, right? Like all of these things that are happening, these individual events that I guess, you know, involve relatively few people. They're all part of a culture that I started seeing it represented in media. Like when Wet Hot American Summer came out, there's several jokes in the film, but the one that stood out to me, and I stopped the movie, and then I fucking Googled it because I didn't get it. There's a scene where Michael Showalter he's a camp counselor, and he's on the phone with his mom, and he's talking to his mom, blah blah. You can't hear her side of the conversation; you can only hear his. And he's like, "I really like this girl, and she's really cute, blah blah blah." And then you don't hear what she's saying. You see his face, and he's like. He says something like, I don't know how big her nose is, or something like that, right? But it was this, and I didn't get it, and I think I probably asked people about it. I was like, what the fuck does this mean? Like, why would this even make sense? And then I realized this is even the way this guy acted, he was like, so that the Jewish caricature of the beta, right? And I had to put this together over years, dude. Like, it took me a long time to actually figure this out. Like, Woody Allen and fucking all of these self-deprecating Jewish comedians and everything. And Showalter is playing an almost Woody Allen-like role of being that fucking, you know, beta Jew. And his mom is browbeating him because she might not be a good Jewish girl. And I had no idea. It took me a long time to figure this out. And I was like, oh, fuck. All of a sudden, this is the pain of revelation. I recontextualized everything. Oh, this has always been there. I just didn't know. I didn't realize it. Again, I didn't recognize it because I'm from a place where racism is bad, ethnicity is irrelevant, all people are the same and should be treated the same, and if you don't treat someone the same, there's a good chance that someone's going to beat the shit out of you in a public place, and everyone's going to agree with it. Mm-hmm. The Midwest, honest to fucking God, like, the experience of growing up in the Midwest is probably one that everybody should experience, because if you don't experience that, you're not going to, I mean, you're going to fucking...
If there was any part of the United States that was to become that would become something similar to like the Russian USSR, it's the motherfucking Midwest. Like my impression of the Midwest is actually fairly labor wise and fairly to your point, ideologically classically liberal, right? Like you know, that's where, I mean, that's the whole, like, you know, Thoreauian fucking American transcendentalism comes out of that region.
And there's a reason for that, too. It's because I had to go and I got to go to a goddamn Del Taco in order to lay in a patch of grass whenever I fucking moved to L.A. Like, there's a reason for that. Like, if you live in a place where there's trees and shit.
If you were going to have... Right. If you were going to have a genuine, like, workers' revolution anywhere in the United States, it would be in the fucking Midwest.
Like, I mean, we've had several.
Right,
so
right. That's where the unions, like, most of the unions rose out of that region, right? And that's why there's unions still in those regions, and why they're still some of the most, like, again, like, a lot of the people who moved there, I don't know how much of this is translated, but, like, a lot of people who moved to the Midwest were from Western and Central Europe, right? From like
absolutely
fucking
Gus is Swedish.
From Germany, from, you know what I mean? So they have that like strong worker spirit there, right? And that's why of any place in the United States, the Midwest is quite possibly the most industrious from just like a people standpoint, right?
Yeah,
like
absolutely. At an individual level.
Right. Like, I mean, as far as like actual industry, right? Most of that seems to happen in California.
I mean, manufacturing, yeah. Well, depending on the manufacturing.
Well, not manufacturing. I just mean like if you were looking at like stuff made, California is like shit is made in California.
Well, I think that's
Um,
probably one reason for that is because California is as large as much of the Midwest, depending on which states you're
right.
talking
No,
about.
dude, California accounts for more. California's population accounts for more than 10% of the United States population.
Well, if you, I mean,
Holy fuck.
forget per capita, but like just, I mean, I'm talking. This is one of
Just
the
people.
reasons why.
I just mean people, like sheer people.
But
Like
forget per capita.
no,
I've heard a lot of people repeatedly. So this thing I wasn't joking about it, but it was something that I've been talking about a long time, with respect to the United States splitting up. There's no way. Like people that are like people that people know are now talking about this. Like there's no way that the United States, as geographically delineated as it is, there's no way that the United States, and also with respect to manufacturing, with respect to where shit comes from, blah 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 blah. So people are looking at the United States.
agriculture. There's
Oh,
a lot of
fucking
things that we're
agriculture! Jesus Christ! One of the only reasons agriculture is not as authoritative as it could be in the national conversation is because this is one of the reasons why I'm so passionate about right to repair. Because right to repair, or the lack of farmers' right to repair, is one of the reasons why multinational fucking companies like John Deere can keep farmers from doing work on their own fucking machines. And how do you oppress the people who create your food? Well,
right.
you fuck up their goddamn tools. That's the only way. I mean, Mao did
And
this. Yeah, just plant fucking plants closer together, bro. Yeah, let's fucking embrace Lysenkoism. No problem. It's not a big deal. Just get rid of your spades. Fuck spades, dude. Just use. No, like that's one of the reasons why this stupid fucking shit. Like the frustrating thing to me is people are like, "Oh, you said communism? Well, I know what kind of person you are." No, motherfucker, you're just incapable of mapping
right.
metaphors.
Also, you don't understand. You clearly don't seem to understand what communism. Like, I don't know. I just yeah. I mean, everything's a gross simplification, right?
Yeah,
But
communism isn't fucking Mao. Communism isn't just Stalin. Communism is a it. That's why That's when I said earlier. Like I stopped thinking about things in terms of yeah, modern terminology because it's fucking trash now. And one of the reasons it's trash is because, again, call me cynical, I believe it's intentional. So I'm pretty sure, and this again is my fucking my I guess call me a conspiracy theorist. I think that there are people who are trying to flood. I mean, it's happening to social media, so I don't even know why it's a stretch. Like, there are people
right,
who are trying to flood and conflate concepts together. If you say communist, well, you're a Republican. If you say fucking fascist, well, you must be a leftist. Or at least, I mean, now they're trying to make it so that it's liberal to say fascist. But no, that's not how it is. I don't have beliefs based on that shit. So I take ideology and then I reduce those ideologies as insofar as I can into a stratified set of principles. And then I look at those principles and I say, this is a bad way to combine principles. So I have my own principles. My own principles suggest that the principles that make up the ideology of communism are deadly. And I mean, it's true also with capitalism, which is why China is more capitalistic than the United States. The United
yeah,
States has done a way better job of preventing people from dying from stupid shit than China, which is why China is winning. So if China keeps going at the rate that it's going, China's going to win because they're willing to say fuck regulation. China is truly laissez-faire.
yeah, right. In a way that's like, it's weird. It's an authoritarian, laissez-faire market. It is so bizarre.
It's not
Well,
that weird because it's literally just slavery
yeah, yeah.
with the
It's
guise of freedom, with the guise of choice.
somehow they've convinced the wider population.
Well,
Like,
somehow because the United States says it is freedom. Like it's so fucking subversive, it's disturbing. Like they're saying, "Well, what do you mean? You don't You don't want the choice to take a train to fucking Xinjiang or fucking Wuhan or fucking Dalian. You don't want that choice? We're giving you the choice. I mean, it's
And then I think it's funny, like when China was like, "We will give you all jobs."
you have jobs for days.
We have 0%. They somehow have abolished poverty.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, how can
And
you
then we're
not
like- and
abolish
now we're
poverty
like-
in a communist nation? A great communist nation.
And then on top of that, you start to wonder. Wait a minute. At least now that you mention it, I'm starting. Are like these people being
Wait,
compelled
what you said?
to work?
You cut out for a second. You said, "Now that you mention it," and then it cut out.
I was like, wait. I was like, now that you mention it, I'm thinking, wait a minute. Are they being compelled to work? Like, is it kind of like a work or die situation?
Well,
Which
I mean,
is-
obviously, no more than you're being compelled to work. No more than I was being compelled to work
Sure,
prior to being
sure,
laid off.
that's-
So, I mean,
But to be fair, in America, it is far more feasible to be unemployed or even homeless, right? Like, you can do that as much as like you'll probably be oppressed and have all kinds of problems. Like, you can do it.
oh, you won't be
Right.
oppressed in Berkeley, at least.
Right. Well, in other parts of the country. Well, I don't even mean oppressed in like a direct way.
Right.
Like, I mean, obviously there's instances.
Just disadvantaged.
Right. But yes, like you're probably not going to be pitied. But like, there's some people, at least from what I've heard. I don't know anyone like this. Well, no, actually I do know. I know of a person. Like, there are some people who genuinely like. It's not. It's almost a choice. Right? Like, they're like, yeah, no, I don't want to work. I don't want, you know what I mean?
Oh, I have zero problem identifying those people. This is not an issue for
Yeah.
me. And if someone wants to do
No.
that, I have no problem with that either.
No,
But
I do,
in
100%.
Berkeley,
Like, if-
we have fucking
right, if-
so many fucking 17-year-old kids. We literally call them, what do we call them? We had a word for them. It wasn't, what was it? I think it was like recreational homelessness. They had a home. They could go to that home. There were parents in that home. They just didn't want
they
to.
just choose not to. That is so dumb. Fucking hell.
Yeah,
and
it's
that's-
not
and-
pretty.
yeah.
But in China, that's not the case. One of the funny things, I actually saw this thing on, I don't remember where the fuck I saw it, but I guess it originated on Instagram or Insta fucking scam, whatever the fuck it was. It was a Nigerian woman who was criticizing Sweden. She had moved from Nigeria to Sweden. Or I guess she wasn't criticizing Sweden, I guess. She was criticizing the mindset of the Swedish. So she said, you know, to all the people who are talking about Nigeria like as a third world country, you're whatever. She didn't actually, I don't know if she used the word racist. She didn't actually, but it was more like an economic / cultural critique. And she was like, when you are in Nigeria and you buy a house, it's not on credit. When you buy a car, it's not on credit. No matter what you buy, you're paying in cash. In Sweden, you buy a house, it's on credit. You go to the hospital, it's on credit, 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 credit. Everything's on credit, which means when you lose your job, you're done. You lose everything. In Nigeria, you keep your house that you've paid for. You keep, your car if you've got a car that you've paid for. You keep all the things you've paid for. And, I mean, this is, it's obviously true that that's a thing. I don't know what the per capita rate is, but here comes my tinfoil. There are specific interests right now that are working extremely hard to make sure that these third world countries that they're currently trying to quote unquote save are no longer using fiat, that they're using payment systems. And some people think that it's because they want all of the fees and things that are so. I don't think it's that at all. Well, I think it's part of it, but I don't think that's like the fucking the anemone on the fucking belly of the shark or whatever. Like, that's nothing.
Sure.
What they want is and this is what happened with the Dodd-Frank legislation in 2009. They want every individual's wealth tied to a central, whatever it is, whether it's central to the state, central to the continent, central to the whatever. So our Fed is now centrally tied to the IMF. So the International Monetary Fund has a great deal of influence over the U.S. Federal Reserve. And there's no other way to get around that, because if we want to inject massive amounts, like let's say someone did something incredibly fucking stupid, like the dumbest thing you could ever imagine, and printed 30% of all US dollars in the past 6 months. Like, let's say someone did that. Where's the fucking money coming from? Because we got to borrow it. On a balance sheet, we've got to borrow it from somewhere. And we're currently borrowing that money. And we're borrowing that money with interest. So what happens is, when you tie yourself to those particular institutions, which is what you do when you buy a house, you know, you're tying yourself to an institution. It's just not the IMF, it's the bank. But that bank is tied to the Fed, and the Fed is tied to the IMF, which means whenever there's a failure, if you don't print more money, then everything comes down. But if you can prevent that by just money printer, if you can prevent that, then what you do is you create massive amounts of inflation. And the people who
printer go burr.
And it does. It's so good at it. And the people who were unaffected are the people in Nigeria who paid cash for their home. The people who paid cash are the only ones that are unaffected. Everyone else is affected to some degree. The exact same thing, you can see it in every market. If I buy some type of crypto and I put it in a wallet and I make that wallet a paper wallet, and I set it aside, yeah, the crypto is going to go up and down, but I've still got my crypto. If I buy silver, physical silver, and I put that physical silver in a safe, yeah, the price of silver is going to go up and down, but it's still there. Whether or not it goes up and down is speculative. But if you tie your fucking bank account, if you tie your 401k, if you tie your fucking retirement to some market or a set of markets, and that set of markets is tied to the Fed, and the Fed is tied to the IMF, yeah, you don't have anything to put in a safe. And putting things in a safe isn't even necessarily a good thing. Like, kind of putting all your eggs in one safe. So I thought it was funny because, like, everybody was mad at her, like, fuck you, go back to Africa or whatever. And I was like, that's very interesting. I had a different take about it. I was just like, you're very right about that, but no one
we've
picked up on it.
Right. We are now grounded in everything is tied to ephemeral value. Like, value is inherently, like, nonsense, right? Not nonsense. It's inherently made up.
Well, this is why. You're right. You're 100%. You're 100% correct.
But the fact that the value that we've tied it to is not a physical good means it is much more prone to, one, manipulation, and two, just all like comes crumbling down.